Okay. Let's do this. Mercenary Workshop, why didn't you make this video in the last X number of years? Yeah, I know. But listen, who knows why that is? Maybe it's because I just wanted them to end as fast as the human concept of time would allow, or maybe it was just because I fell asleep. Who knows? These are questions for the scholars. But regardless, it is tragic, because it was a very good year for 3 seconds. Alright everyone, grab your tetanus shots because we're diving in head first with the Rust! So Rust took the 17th, 19th spot on my list? Okay, sorry, I had to redo this. But I did want to mention that I did beat all these games before I started whining about them, or whatever counts as beating for these ones. I'll clarify. Whatever. But as with the last video, take this with a grain of salt, please. And honestly, being completely genuine, I don't really think I played any really terrible games this year, last year, the year before. You know what? Shut the fuck up. Maybe I will clarify what I mean by beating Rust. Now, I'm a little rusty on Rust, which is lucky because the game seems as rusty as the last time I played it. Fuck you. Maybe they were sponsored by Rusties, or Facepunch just used the 6 years development time to suck each other off, or vote in a US election, or become a developer on Rust. You know, the kind of thing that's apparently just a complete fucking waste of time. Now, I used to be quite the Rust player myself, until the drinking started. Then my life just seemed to rust over. I didn't really want to be that hard on this game. One, because I only put about 5 hours into it the year I played it. And two, because I like survival games about as much as I like talks about rape and the Bible. And three, because I do kind of have a soft spot for the community.
Justin, take his gun so you can get some epic gamer footage.
Yes!
Where the hell am I? Oh, god damn it, I'm in E3?
Ah!
Dylan!
Oh, why? I can't see you. Ooh. Kill Dylan.
Wait.
Justin, he killed me. Kill Dylan.
You killed me!
Kill him.
That is the wrong
Just
one.
killed me!
Wait,
Kill him.
Damn it.
Oh,
Kill
God.
Dylan.
I don't know where Dylan is. Okay, do that.
Oh, I'm gonna die. I fell off a cliff.
Don't worry, Walter.
Please don't kill me. I only have 3 health. I'm starving.
Please kill him, Justin.
I just want to find where you are.
I'm freezing to death.
Okay, yeah, I get that. I'm in K4. Where are you?
I'm up. I'm fine.
You're okay, yeah, but like, where are you? We need to be.
I'm not having you kill me. Up. I just starved to death.
Did you? Don't worry, Dylan. I'm coming to save you.
I have a solar panel I can give you if you help me up.
Yeah.
Wow, you had to bribe it.
You're gonna kill me, aren't you?
That would be stupid.
Hey, who just ran into my warehouse?
You have to leave soon.
Excuse me?
Probably David. Your
Hey,
corpse is right over there.
Yeah. Oh, also, you see that green thing?
Raw chicken breast.
You see that green thing over there?
No. Alright, now I have another rock.
Which is all I wanted to expunge before I tell all of you watching why this game has all the replay value of a complete human life. Now I know there's probably a few Vishnu worshipping Hindus out there that would argue that living that worthless existence over and over again until you finally get one where shit actually fucking happens is probably gonna be a goddamn blast. And I don't want to take that away from them per se, but to me, it's kind of like leaving a child locked in a freezer in a grocery store. Like sure, maybe something will eventually happen that's kinda cool, but I don't think it's really worth sitting in there for the next 10 years to figure out what that fucking is. What was I talking about? Oh, yeah, right. Alright, I'll admit that the UI seems polished. The community is still as distinct as ever. The main problem is, Let's see. Shit hitboxes, plenty of KOS in servers not listed as KOS,
okay.
bears stealing your guitars.
Did it kill you?
Oh my god, it's gonna murder me. It's gonna murder me.
No! Oh no!
What just happened that he's still dead?
This got yeeted into the future.
That's unfortunate.
The dice roll that is the early game survival rate, the soundtrack being placed in terrible spots.
Why did intense music start playing? Is somebody playing intense music?
No, it's just the game getting angry.
When you go back for your guitar and get killed by an entirely new bear.
I found it!
Something in a little while.
Wait,
Chicken burger.
what?
You get killed again by the bear?
The absurdly high TTK for a game that requires you to sit down for hours just to get in one fucking gunfight, going back and getting your guitar for the third time only to find out that it entirely fucking despawned because this game wants to take away whatever bit of fucking sanity I goddamn have left! I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. If you like this game, I understand the appeal of a game where you can bash someone in the head with a rock over and over again. Probably because it's very similar to the feeling I get when I'm trying to market my channel. Regardless, to me, it just seems like an awful lot of, oh, you just spawned with your rock, huh? Well, sorry, but I need your rock for my scale model of me stealing your rock. I played it solo for research in the video, and I lasted maybe like 15 minutes. It's so fucking boring, dude. I
also don't have feudalism, which is kind of shit.
Alright, I see
even
your
though I start
point,
with
Gary, which is the name I've decided to give to the voice in my head that keeps putting up
so-
counter arguments on the screen. But I didn't want to dwell on this game forever because I have about 16 other games, 18 games to get through. So, closing statements. This game would be great if you fix everything wrong with it. Oh god, what am I saying? What am I saying? Who am I kidding? Everyone who likes this game is just going to ignore what I have to say and just say I'm unworthy is a game I really wanted to like. Team Cherry said this game was good on their blog, and I'm about as good with my money as Mansa fucking Musa, so the galaxies converged, the stars aligned, and I ended up with unworthy in my Steam library. Now, in case that wasn't unlikely enough, I have another impossibility. I actually like this game a good bit. I swear to God, Gary, back into the subconscious. The reason it's so low on the list is that I'm attempting to not be emotionally driven for once in my life and say that this game has a good few objective issues. Example A, the color palette. It's about as interesting as my personality, and the musical score is refer to previous, and the goddamn jumping. You might start to feel like I'm reaching for things to complain about when I'm referring to a mechanic that doesn't even strictly speaking exist in the game, but don't worry, it finds a way to be janky as all hell. When your character falls off a high enough platform, he just fucking rolls when he hits the ground. This has led to so many unnecessary deaths for me. It's not challenging to remember a mechanic that feels about as artificial as the Gary jokes I've made, or the fake persona I put on so that people can't see the real me, or a video promising consistent uploads. It's really fucking annoying when in comparison to all the thought that Alexander Kuzmanovic clearly put into the world itself, and it comes off even worse as a blatant chasm in quality. Now, unfortunately, I am in fact 8 and have been breastfed on Skyrim and Dark Souls lore my entire childhood, but I'll try and do my best to decipher what exactly the plot is, because it took me a bit to actually figure out. Atlas is somehow responsible for unleashing this filth plague upon the world, and most of the bosses you fight are corrupted by it. So you need to get past all of them and work your way to the point where you can either kill him and take his place, or in a secret ending, kill the god of filth and free the land from its government's policies of degrading infrastructure and lack of suicide watch. So basically it's like fighting Italians in the 1940s. Speaking of bosses, there are actually some great fights scattered in here. In particular, Gaston is probably my favorite boss fight of the year for me. Fighting him is what I imagine being in an active school shooting would be like. This boy is relentless, but not the sharpest knife in the gardening shed. Everything is really well telegraphed, and he even has moves that play into the environment very well, which is very rare to see in boss fights these days. The last thing I'd like to praise is the stamina system, which I'm pretty sure is the only one in a while I've used that I think actively encourages me to make sure absolutely every hit counts in a situation, due to how punishing the attacks are from the enemies and how easily the bar drains. Oh, and you can jump over ground attacks with your sword charge move. Nope. No. I've been too nice to this game for too long. What's wrong with it? Okay, so my only assumption for why Alexios Komnenos decided to make this game look like the equivalent of plain oatmeal is probably to emphasize the final boss, which has a bit of red on the bottom. And if you'd like some bit of explanation for how this is relevant to the story we've been piecing together up until this point, I would be happy to explain to you that I have the exact same fucking question. I don't think there's any clear thematic idea I'm picking up on. There's really nothing impressive about it other than the notable visual shakeup, and even then it's basically just this game's take on when the DVD loading screen hits the corner. Oh shit! I'm sure this is just some artistic thing I'm too lobotomized to understand, but I can't really buy into it being important enough to turn your game to this whole gray, messy soup. Or maybe for time's sake, whenever I refer to the art direction, I'll just call it the gray. Sometimes I couldn't tell if there's something in the foreground or not because there is a blur over it, but it's very hard to distinguish. I've imagined more aesthetically interesting games staring at my eyelids. On top of that, some of the enemy placement I just genuinely don't understand the thought process behind. Like, look at this. It's use the bow or eat shit. This guy changes his attack so so that even if you roll right, there's no way to not take damage, because not only will he not be done with his attack, but he'll leave a trail of death and suffering behind him for you to step on and also take damage. Now, I could tolerate a particularly good bowl of oatmeal or plain yogurt if I have to, but I can't say that it made itself stand out in the sea of great foods that came out this year. I don't think a black and white game is impossible to make good, but I can't imagine that one with pixels the size of Minecraft blocks being the one to pull off the aesthetic. Despite this, I am relatively excited to see what this guy does next. He seems apt to respond to criticism and seems as if he really understands the shortcomings of his game. For a one-man team, I have to emphasize how impressive making a game of this scale is in spite of the issues I have with it. But now that the sappy shit's out of the way, I can get unreasonably upset about two of the best games ever made. Dark Souls 1 and The Last of Us Now 2, I guess. Like, there are... well, now there's... whatever. Are two games that I played for the first time ever in their respective remasters this year. This year being last year, or maybe you're watching this in 2020, the great year most representative of my vision when looking at non-existent issues in video games that I really like, and where you're already likely aware of the fact that I really like these games. I found The Last of Us to have a really well-told narrative for being both a zombie game and a video game, which is more of a reason not to care as your pick, and Dark Souls, which is probably in my top 3 games of all time, alongside keeping your emotions bottled up and Duck Duck Goose. Now, the only reason I'm choosing to talk about them at the prestigious 14th and 15th spots, or 16th and 17th spots, are for the following reasons. They aren't really any different from how they released back in 2011 and 2013 respectively. Sure, Dark Souls Remaster has some nice effects changes, and I'm sure if I looked for it, I could find something different in The Last of Us Remaster, but the community has gone rampant for the Dark Souls Remaster for not changing any of the bad balancing choices and matchmaking issues, and that's probably the reason why The Last of Us Remaster was able to slip by without getting beaten up by the crowd of angry gamers still spitting and shitting all over Dark Souls 1's guts. But it hasn't got past me, and I'm here to tell you that that fucking sniper still doesn't have a gunman behind it, and the gun doesn't even fucking swivel to shoot at you. This guy must be really skilled if he can aim a bullet at you without even adjusting the barrel towards you. Or the fact that the flashlight looks around wherever you aim it, even though it's just attached to your body and it doesn't make sense for the flashlight to be whatever. Even though these games fail as remasters, for the most part they don't even come close to failing as games, and will by all means be remembered as classics as far as I'm concerned. And while I won't get into it here for time's sake, these are still some fantastic games.
This is something I can't say in complete confidence about Gree.
Gree is more like playing a painting and less like playing a game, and this is something that I've started to notice more commonly with games that are more towards the bottom of this list. It's that I'm not really going full autismo about their quality, with one exception, I guess. This isn't like Dreadnought or For Honor last year, where I was honestly just so insulted and bored by them that I was effectively taking a nail gun shot to the dick every single time I talked about them. In fact, I think Gree is effectively perfect at what it sets out to achieve as an art form. Now, I know taking someone who put a game that they say is, in quote, perfect at number 13 out of 17 on a Games of the Year list remotely seriously can be hard, but let me explain my philosophy. No, not that one. I mean that Gree is much more of an interactable painting than it is a fully fledged video game. Something like Gree is so innately different in terms of what its goal is to express to you as an art form and how it plays that I don't really know how to compare it to the rest of these games. Because if this was an art projects of 2018 list, I'd probably put it close to the top, but this is a video games list, and being blunt, I don't think Gree even comes close to what the art form can offer to us as a unique method of expression. You know, with the game having as much gameplay as a QA test.
That being said, Gree's experience is still pretty unbelievable, and it was so different from anything else that I played I can't help but appreciate the hell out of it.
And I know this is coming from me, the guy who's best known for spending his time doing such meaningful endeavors as playing Halo 5 in 2018, and 2019, and 2020, and having staring contests with my carpet, so I know it can come off as a little bit of a weak endorsement, especially because I haven't even played Journey. But I personally recommend you guys to check this one out for yourselves and bring your own thoughts about it. Personally, I think this game falls into the Spec Ops Inside and Orkin camp of being much more interesting to talk about than to actually play. And if I were to talk about the gameplay, I think I could justifiably complain about there really is fuck all to it. And if you're gonna walk around for this whole game and have that be the gimmick, why even bother with the platforming and puzzles? You could either take these concepts and make them into something remotely interesting, or you could just not have them. Because I know it's gonna be hard to market a game with no gameplay, but I mean, come on. Like this? It's nothing. There were plenty of times I just had a stroke and couldn't figure out the incredibly basic puzzles for a couple minutes, but if anything, that just interrupted my flow. So this begs the question, why not just have no gameplay period? I'm assuming that people would have gotten even more unreasonably enraged if there was no gameplay at all, compared to just a little bit, so I assume to market themselves as an actual video game, they had to put in some gamey elements in. And speaking of gamey, Distance came out of beta this year, fucking nailed it. And now that it's a full game, it of course has a story mode, and I don't even remotely understand it. Maybe I just need to get good and really pay attention to every single low resolution frame on my screen, but all that I could really gather from the mess of intercom sounds and slightly masochistic undertones was that it was pretty fun. The resolution is a little clammy, kind of look like you're looking through dirty binoculars at the game sometimes, and I really don't know why. I've seen trailer footage that looks higher resolution than the game for some reason, so I'll just chalk it up to being an issue on my end. Even though my settings are maxed out. Another thing is some of the levels can look like they're made from Halo 5 Forge, which is a little lame, but the core design of Distance is just so damn fun.
Look for work. Some people think that using hedge trimmers to cut their genitals off is fun. We're gonna need a little more to go on than that.
Oh god, I need something to fucking take the edge off. Racing games have always been a little bit of a stagnant genre to me, and I obviously don't think Distance is revolutionary or anything because, you know, number 12. But honestly, anything different from the standard Forza or Need for Speed nonsense we've been getting lately is a kind of a substantial improvement already. So yeah, it's a quarter and a sea of dimes, but it's still pretty neat. The soundtrack is banger as hell. I don't think you could have done much better than a heavy synth score for this game, which, according to their blog, is supposed to have this heavy emphasis on flow and minimalism. I don't really understand how it's possible not to ascertain that after playing this game for longer than a nanosecond, but I guess what I'm trying to say is that the soundtrack does very well to immerse you in the setting. Synth, I guess, is just a very futuristic and modern sounding type of audio. Maybe it's the way that it's created with an item that's more technologically forward than a traditional instrument, but all I know is that it fits, as it does with pretty much any sci-fi setting, and I would guess that it's probably the thing that would make people stick around for a while after they started playing it. The main driving's pretty fun too, not gonna lie. And I know it took me a solid minute to bring up the driving in a fucking driving game, but I think the alcohol's starting to kick in and I'm thinking mine's easier. Anyway, the tracks are all very visually unique from one another. They all have pretty cool gimmicks for the most part, like having to fly around through rings and sections where you have to drive sideways, upside down, loops, jumps, drops, peaks, valleys, dog shit. There's a lot to play around with, and the thrusters and controls on the steering are very responsive, which makes these sections satisfying to platform through. Your car can feel a little bit like fine china at sometimes. Like sometimes you'll drive 3 miles an hour into something and you'll die, and sometimes you'll go 3 times the speed of sound and you won't. I assume this is something weird with the hitbox of the car, but I don't really want to make any outlandish claims, as it didn't really happen enough to be all that decipherable. And I don't want to drone on about this for another eon and finish somewhere around the time that Half-Life 3 and the Avatar movies are finished. Okay, I wrote that joke back in 2018 and it didn't age that well, but whatever. But I think that many people will be attracted to this game for the workshop and the community around it. When a game's community recreates all 12 of the racing realms from the hit series Hot Wheels Acceleracers, released between the years of 2005 and into 2006 with the DVD distribution of Ultimate Race and the 4th and final movie in the Accelerations franchise that left off on a cliffhanger and was not resolved until this very day? Holy fuck, it makes for a pretty good game. And the level creator has a lot of freedom to it, and there are a few great community tracks that I've played as well. Now, I'm trying to think of what the best way to segue that into a game about a British lady killing Mexicans and pagans is. Spoilers. But yeah, I guess this is the first real AAA game I'm talking about, because the other two were fake, and as such must be banished into the realm of Fallout 76, Overkill, The Walking Dead, and Rust. Okay, maybe not that extreme, especially because Rust isn't a trip. Whatever. Nonetheless, Shadow of the Rise of the Tomb Raider came out this last 2018, and I call it that not just for the amazing humor of it, but also because I think this game is basically just Rise of the Tomb Raider, or maybe a mirror would be more accurate term to use, as aside from the setting, they're basically just twins if one of them got their hair dyed. You fight the same soldier guys and the gamely reskin of the last game's version of the hard enemy. The Legion guys from the last game already got reskinned as the tribe people in this one, and even the Legion guys are already reskinned versions of the samurai people from the first game. This isn't too bad, as these enemies were fine, and it's not like they're Covenant good or anything, but they're perfectly well designed. They shoot at you, they throw grenades, they take cover, they hit you if they get up close. There's different types of enemies for the armored. one layer of shield before you can hurt them. You may have to focus fire if there's enemies around. It's a good sandbox is what I'm trying to say. No, but this is a Tomb Raider game, so the whole thing kind of reviews itself. There are tombs that you raid, big surprise. There are things that you climb. I gotta say, the cinematography for the most part was pretty much the best thing in the game for me. There are a lot of times that they'll have a player in these cramped platforming sections just for these wide shots as you enter a new area. And they do a great job of adding a sense of scale in these areas and inspiring awe at the environments, which I think the presentation really adds to as well, because I found the setting very memorable. I don't know how much of this I'd attribute to good art design or how much I'd give to the direction and cinematography. I'd lean more towards the latter though, as I do remember when the trailer for the game came out and I saw my beautiful snow-covered peaks of the last game had been replaced by this big, stupid, dumb jungle. I was a little bummed. But that is entirely subjective though, and it really isn't that big of a deal, especially because subjectively speaking, in my opinion, I'm still sane, whereas objectively, this is irrelevant to what I'm talking about. Probably because I can easily segue this into my point about how Lara, at least once per game, just goes full Targaryen and starts hunting down and murdering everyone in the immediate vicinity, which is a bit different than how she's portrayed for the rest of the game, but I guess I can't be too judgmental, as you know, a good murder spree can really do wonders for your figure. You know, it opens up the pores, keeps your bod looking pretty close to perfect. Lara Croft is really hot, by the way, which is probably why this game edged out distance. But to be double fair, Sorlag is at least twice as hot, and it's probably why Quake Champions edged out Tomb Raider. And Quake is a bit of a strange one for me to tackle, mainly because I only played it for about a solid 10 hours the first time this year. And to the type of people that play Quake, saying that you played one of the games for 10 hours would probably prompt a response something to the effect of, "Oh, you sweet, sweet, stupid retard. 10 hours in 1 year? I've played more than 10 hours of Quake in the last 5 minutes. I've been playing Quake since 1996, and I haven't gotten up out of my computer chair ever since. I'm better than you. I bet you haven't even played Quake Wars." No, but how about a compromise here? You're basically right in the middle of the list, so I'll just give my case and I'll leave you to your lethargic, high-caliber enjoyment. Is that okay? Well, if it isn't, I'd like to direct your attention to the big red X at the top right of your screen. If you're a Quake player who hasn't seen sunlight in 20 years and need further help, it looks like the hit marker you get Oh, looks like they found it.
Yeah, Mark 4, I'm actually on mobile, so if you can help me out.
So from what I've played of Quake Champions, what I just described to you is effectively the worst part of it. In the 10 hours I played, I got 3 private messages saying I'm shit, got berated and voice chat at least 4 or 5 times, and listened to people getting berated closer to 20. And yeah, I know there's a mute button, but I do like to talk to people in video games, believe it or not, and having the most elitist group of human beings since the National Socialist Party doesn't do wonders for me on that end. Divorced from that, the game's actually pretty good, to be perfectly honest. Sure, there are things here and there, like the longest yard being so open that you could effectively shoot anyone from anywhere on the map. And yes, I know there are like 2 exceptions on that map, but considering the spawn points are in areas so visible they'd rival a skyline in Kansas, I don't really think it's all that much better. And then I think the game is a little too chaotic for some of the more objective-based modes. I can't really think of anything empirical to back that up with, just call it preference, I guess. Either way, we're 1 game into the top 10 now, and I'm still complaining about this one that I like, so let's get on to the good stuff. The game looks gorgeous for all the shit it has to render on screen at any given point, and I'm surprised that the game can even run a 12th of as good as it does without blowing up my computer fan. I admit that I do have a pretty decent computer, but it's still very impressive on higher graphical settings either way. Another thing is that, and this might come off as hypocritical considering what I just said, the game is very casual friendly in terms of gameplay, not people-wise. I think that all things taken into account, being able to jump into a match and have a shit ton of ways to murder anyone at any given time will be fun as a surface level for at least most people. Unless you're an absolute non-conformist who likes to do things more meaningful in life than murdering people in a video game. So absolutely nothing. Oh, speaking of gunshots, most of the sound design for the weapons is really great too. The rocket sound effects has a really satisfying thump to them as they're shot, and I think that all the weapons have really recognizable sound effects for when you're hitting an opponent, so none of them get very repetitive. I tried to get most of the games on most maps with as much character variety as I could, but I still think that no holds bar, no objective other than kills, shoot everything that moves type gameplay is what suits Quake the best. Maybe that's just because of all the nightmares I have for being trapped in the education system for so long that it releases all my primal urges. But I do like the other game modes that have objectives. I just don't think they actively play to the game's strengths, which I've done a pretty shit job of describing, but regardless, it's how I feel. The movement is so fast-paced in Quake that it's going to take all of 3 seconds after spawning to get into a gunfight, and in these more no-holds-bar type game modes, I think they're much more fun, as you don't have to consider a couple trillion outcomes the second after you spawn in. Except who to shoot, when to shoot, why to shoot, how to shoot. I can see it being a sensory overload type game for some, but I still think it plays very well. Even the game modes that do have objective-based structures are still fun. Slipgate was a pretty fresh concept, and it was interesting enough to be interesting. whenever I could finish a fucking game of it. So yeah, fun game, almost as fun as Paladins. Now, I'm acutely aware that Paladins is not exactly the first thing you think of when in reference to a top 10 games of any year list, so I'll briefly validate you by telling you the shit that's wrong with it. I don't think anyone is really disputing that the art direction of this game is pretty much just beta Overwatch. Now, I don't agree that this game is an Overwatch clone by any means, because I think if you played both and know the dev's history, you would have to be fairly low on the spectrum to still think that at this point. But even divorced from that, this game is really weird visually. When I say that, I want to clarify. I mean that navigating the menus and staring at loading screens can kind of be like looking at a corrupted Excel spreadsheet sometimes. I guess some of the people you play as just don't have loading screen icons for their cards for some reason, which is a very visually intriguing choice. I wish more games were this ahead of their time. The art itself on each of the maps and their construction is perfectly serviceable, for lack of a better term. It's like perfectly not distractingly bad. But I also saw some fairly questionable hitboxes in my time playing. Sometimes I felt like I could kill something by firing 2 feet to the right on occasion. The only other thing I thought was a little weird was the horses at the start of the matches. Maybe I'm just stupid and the type of person that will make a however long minute video about games that came out last year and think it's a good idea, but I never really understood the point of it. Oh, that's just great. If you're trying to make the maps bigger and not having the player walk from one main base to the other take a fucking fortnight, why don't you just place in incremental spawn points that trigger whenever the objective gets moved to a new spot?
Hey, Merc for Work, that sounds like another game. Merc for Work, that sounds like another game. The other game that you said this game wasn't a copy.
Yes, I know, but it works in that game, so why don't you just do it here? It feels very out of place when I just go on a horse. Why don't you just spawn me closer to the objective? Now, I obviously do have a few smaller issues with Paladins that I just discussed, none of which are lawbreakers, but I can honestly say the same thing about masturbating in the middle of the day. I mean, yeah, you might run into the occasional hiccup, but overall it's the same experience that you were probably expecting. And there's a lot to appreciate in this game. Paladins champions actually have depth to them beyond their movesets, or I guess I should say within their movesets. You can modify their talents, loadouts, alongside having a picked band phase, which definitely adds a lot more variety to the ways you can play each of the characters, in addition to it not just being a raffle stomp whenever you pick a character that can be countered somewhat easily. Ultimates in this game are much more coordination heavy and have a lot more readable audio cues on average when compared to other games with big moves and a build-up timer. I don't know, like Titanfall. This means that your ultimate isn't effectively just the free kill button or the free save a kill button, but something that you actually have to work with your team to maximize the effectiveness of. And the longer audio cues means that you won't feel as dick when you get fucked from someone with an ultimate because you did have time to respond to it in most cases. Champions seem to have been designed around this idea of variety being a big focus in the game, and I think it's really well worked into their movesets as well, and it isn't just limited to select screens.
Just as an example, Eevee's Ice Cube
Can not only be used as a defensive ability, but as a good transition into Frostpunk. Frostpunk is one of 2 strategy games on my list this year, and I feel I can relate to this one the most. I mean, the setting is nearly as cold as people's shoulders get whenever I enter a room with them, the politics captures what it's like being in a debate with me, and the people look almost as hopeless as I feel trying to figure out what the fuck to write about Frostpunk, a strategy game so easily understandable that I'm kind of at a loss for interesting things to say about it. So, how about we cool our jets, chill out, and we can ice this bitch. Frostpunk is a top-down city-building survival game where you and your people must survive the harsh environment that you've been put in. And yes, I did kinda describe it like controlling an STD.
which I can imagine is making people think that I have a little bit of undue salt towards this game, which is just completely untrue, as I think that this game is actually really fucking fun.
I think the detail put in the splash art of the citizens in the area you're governing does a really good job of selling the situation you're in. None of the characters are developed, or they're not developed any more than Captain Marvel or Mario or Ray or whatever. Hopefully you get the idea. Which is fine, as writing in actual people you're meant to relate with into a game like this would probably feel very forced. Mainly because you'd have to write in character dialogue in boxes and treat them with equal importance to the events about this life-threatening antibiotic that's about to come and destroy your STD. Moving away from that, another aspect that gives my heart plus 10 degrees is the way that your problems are inverted from start to end. It's really cool, and the most obvious example of this is how, since it's a survival game, prioritizing resources is important. Do you want to prioritize the generator and focus people's hope levels? Focus coal. You want to make sure your tech's up to date? Focus steel. Want to see consistent Mercenary Workshop uploads? Focus patience. And since your worker pool is limited and people are likely to die at some point, this makes the early and mid game a mad scramble of prioritizing what to focus. But then the game turns on its head and say, nah, fuck you, we're in the end game now, and it throws these fucking immigrants on you, and now you have too many to feed. I think in comparison to other strategy games it can get a little basic, but this game does have an absolute ton of replay value considering how every game plays out almost the exact same way in every individual scenario. Kinda like a weird fucked up inversion of the issue I had with Rust, where instead of having infinite boring ways of playing, it has a few very interesting ways of playing out. But I mean, considering that nothing really changes from game to game throughout each of the scenarios, unless you're the type of person who likes to master each and every little quirk of a strategy game until you have it down to a more concrete science, the Turtle Earth theory, you might come away with this game a little bit bored after a while. Not the biggest sentence, especially considering the first run through all the scenarios are still very fun and take a while to do, regardless. I don't think you'll get as much mileage out of this game as something like Civilization, or a Paradox game, or a Therapist. Side note, daily fact about Mercenary Workshop is that every single mental health caretaker has told him, "Mercenary Workshop, please, I'm absolutely begging you, stop buying games solely based off of brand recognition." And finally, for the first out of 17th time, I can promptly tell my therapist to eat the most copious supply of dicks because Dragon Ball FighterZ is actually a real video game. That is effectively the highest endorsement I can give to most of these games made off of previously existing movies or shows. For whatever reason, whenever animated properties are turned into games, they always end up looking like waxy figurines 50% of the way through melting. Taking existing 2D franchises and turning them into 3D ones without any noticeable changes or effort to put them into 3D spaces is seriously how you get some of the dumbest looking video games out there. Oh good. Hopefully you see my point. Why people do this to their games makes me think that the only logical reasoning for it is that it make them look so bad that it's some kind of sick marketing trick by Bandai.
Okay, we'll spend 3 cents to make this game, 5 for that one, 8 for that, and now we have set the bar to the literal core of the earth and we'll hit it with a real video game.
DB Fighters comes out of nowhere with the best fucking cell shading work I've probably seen in a video game. Everything technical about this game is just so fucking impressive.
Why are you nutting about the anime game Nerd for Work with a Red Dead? Red Dead 2 came out this year. You didn't even get Rockstar.
Just let me fucking have this.
I'll admit that the intros for each fighter are technically more animated than something like Street Fighter, but I was just so overly impressed by how well they mimic traditional 2D animation. Example A. Like, his arms are so fucking exaggerated and the foreshortening is ridiculous and they even have fucking smears! It's so well done. It is so well done. I am by no means a fighting game veteran, but from what I played of this game, there doesn't really seem to be any glaring balancing issues, other than Krillin kinda sucks. Every character has the same basic rush combo out, so maybe that just makes the game easier to balance around. But hey, I'm sure others will think it's just lazy design in favor of making the game more casual friendly, so it depends on your mindset. But I, of course, being the brain-dead retard who thought trying to watch this was a good idea, I'm obviously going to try and say that the basic combo system helps more than it hurts. It's a very casual fighting game on the surface, but there's obviously some room for people to go crazy online. Online, there's footage of people just going from full to zero with one combo on some characters if they have a high enough bar. Fuck, I just looked it up and there are people who have done it from 0 bar that can pull this shit off. You people need help. Yes, I get it. At least this is a marked improvement over something like Raging Blast, wherein multiplayer matches would consist of someone shooting... which would God, oh my god. Shut up! Okay. Which in multiplayer matches would consist of someone shooting a beam at another person and then deflecting that beam and then quickly shooting a beam back before the guy had time to realize how retarded he was for shooting a beam in the first place. The main complaint I've heard is the game is too focused on giving the player offensive options while not providing enough defensive ones. And I guess that's completely understandable. I played through the whole story mode without using the block button because I'm a fucking YouTuber who has more important things to do than click 3 buttons to figure out that it's the D-pad. And this is a good transition into talking about the story mode, or more specifically, how it takes whatever abuse you thought you received in normal everyday life and ramped it up by its over 9,000%. It is honestly the worst put together thing in the history of game design. The characters talk to each other like normal, but you direct the speed of the conversation. So if a character hasn't finished speaking and you go on to the next line, the character jumps to the next spot he's supposed to say. It's like they had some kind of instantaneous twitch while the cameraman goes into cardiac arrest in the corner. Not only that, but there's also this obligatory hub map area thing that you have to try to get to the boss of in order to save someone or more likely progress the story. Padding is genuinely the only reason I can think of this being here. These in-between bosses are like fighting a level 1 Magikarp.
Oh, but Mercenary Workshop!
You say with your fucking anime glasses pushed up.
They level you so you can be able to fight the boss.
Okay then, give me that alternate version of the game, so then maybe it would just be the worst design thing in the history of anything ever, and not the easiest thing in the history of anything ever too. This isn't like one of those memes where it's
like, oh, fighting a Goomba versus fighting a level 1 snail in an RPG.
and the snail takes like 30 seconds and the Goomba takes like 1. This is a click, make sure you want to fight, yes, 40 seconds of loading screen, fight 3 enemies, get your score, 12 more seconds, post-battle notifications. That ended up being like 2.5 minutes of my life, you fucking shit game! Fuck! I'm kidding, I love you. No, but this section honestly has been going on for way too long, and I just wanted to end off by saying that what kept me was just the character interactions are really fun, honestly. Overall, I can't excuse the story mode's design, but it kind of was worth playing through for me. Obviously, that doesn't hold any real objective weight, this is not the focus of the game by any extent, and its lacking quality doesn't really take away much from me. I just want to quickly touch on Android 21, because obviously she's going to come off as kind of a fan-servicey character. She is this game's original character, after all. I mean, fucking look at her. But I do actually really like her design, and obviously she's the most interesting thing in the story mode. Her story is kind of something I'd want to see more things invested in than a half-hearted story mode. Oh look, Goku instant transmission to the number 6 game, Monster Hunter World. This is convenient actually, I could tackle both of the damn Jap games at once. Okay, so I think everyone was expecting this to be somewhere at the top of the list, so I'm gonna play devil's sidekick for a minute and get the criticism off that I think this game deserves. I know, I'm such a prick, says Capcom while directing their convoy of dump trucks full of money to the nearest bank. Now let's talk about the Xenojiva in the room, the story. It gets you from one area to the next, but there's nothing particularly interesting outside the world building, and I legitimately forgot all the characters' names when I went back to play it for this video. I mean, except for Tracer. Now, I know that playing Monster Hunter for the story is kind of like going into a porno for the story. Like, yes, it's technically there in Monster Hunter, but what you're really there for is the action. I mean the excitement. I mean the fighting giant monsters. I mean the stabbing. Fuck me. So yes, the game is very well designed for the most part. I think all the monster designs are great, both in terms of gameplay and visual construction. There's very rarely a move I looked at a second time and thought, oh yeah, that was fucking lobotomite design. The moves all have very noticeable tells, and the way the fights are designed as these battles of attrition does very well to separate it from the crowds of other games like it. Oh, and as well to ground the ridiculous setting a little bit. And some of these designs are seriously inspired. I know that a lot of them are probably from the previous game, but monsters like Diablos and Nergigante have such memorable designs. The Diablos having these crazy thick horns and spiked head does so much to make it stand out in the sea of dragon designs we have today, and Nergigante's spiked exterior is a perfect representation of its place as the most fucking annoying thing to kill in human history. The game is a challenge, but as we all know, a challenge that is engaging is infinitely more fun than a not challenge that is not engaging. There is actually a difficulty curve in this game, which is nice. The Witcher thing is honestly fucking hilarious. Like, they actually programmed and scripted a new AI just so this Polish fuck could stab it for an hour. Watching Monster Hunter characters interact with Geralt is seriously like watching Tywin Lannister try and talk to the showrunners of SpongeBob. The way the combat works in squads is great as well. You can mix up your group to maximize DPS, a hammer can yoke from a monster's head to do stun damage, a longsword user can attempt to cut off any severable limbs. My point being that it is a very fun with friends kind of game, and I honestly think that is probably why it ended up being my most played game of the year. Likely because I can get peer pressured about as easily as possible within the confines of a regular human psyche, but also because I genuinely think it's a pretty great game. And seeing as it didn't even make my top 5, I can understand that it comes off as a little hollow, but I do mean it. At the very least, it controls well. Shit. So I'm a little pissed with this one because on one hand, I want to say that if Rockstar didn't make it, it probably would have had potential to be my game of the year. But on the other hand, no fucking other dev team probably could have made this. What I'm trying to say is I don't understand why Rockstar designs their games while scuba diving in an ocean of sludge. I understand that the gameplay isn't really supposed to be anything special, and it's just a vehicle for the narrative, but you can have both. If you can't tell, yes, I am one of those people that thinks Rockstar games control like fucking doo-doo.
Oh, that's okay. I guess yeah, okay. The way the physics engine seems to work is that it's slightly delayed to make for more realistic movement, but it also delays you from effectively getting around. It's not like skillful either, like Dark Souls, where the weapon draw takes a little bit to work. It just feels unresponsive to me, and I just don't have fun with it usually. My main complaint is that it makes the game feel more linear than it actually is. Oh, how can I tactfully handle this gunfight?
Bang, 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 bang. Oh, a horseback section. Wow, now I can finally have my ability to see directly in front of me taken away. Let's also implement this revolutionary feature where if you try and run near a tree, we auto-correct your horse's direction automatically to keep it from hitting the tree. So if you're a person with any amount of gray matter in your head and you dare to try and adjust your horse away from the tree in any other direction than the one the game wants, I guess you could just eat shit and fucking die, retard. Honestly though, aside from that and some pathing issues with some of the AI, none of these issues are really game-breaking, and seeing what kind of shit can come out of an open world these days, yeah, I think we really lucked out. It's excusable in a Stalin kind of way. I mentioned before that the gameplay is kind of just there so that you can view the narrative in a more interesting format, and in this regard, it's actually a complete success. I know some people were complaining about the length of the game, and I thought it was just about perfect, to be honest. The epilogue ramping down after the clusterfuck that was the end of the actual game was a nice change. If I'm totally honest, I'm having a hard time trying to express why I thought the narrative was as good as it was, aside from saying that I found it very emotionally engaging. I guess maybe it's because it's grounded in a way that very few games are these days. Actions have realistic consequences. The characters, oh fuck, the characters, that's right. The cast is so well fleshed out and distinct. Most of them have very memorable character traits and their actions make sense within the way they've been characterized, which is something that has apparently been increasingly difficult for some people. Mrs. Grimshaw's defining personality trait is being very forceful and aggressive, but she also seems like she's very knowledged and hardened from the way she speaks. So it makes sense that a lot of the time she's by herself looking lonely, comparatively speaking, to the other party members, as she doesn't really seem like the type that's a social butterfly. But I bet you could probably relate, nerd. I haven't left my room for days. If I wasn't a gamer, I might have been in trouble, but because of the world of Red Dead, I have a world where I can be the real me. The world is really cool. Something I'd also like to bring up is that there's actually another fucking game that does cities right. In a lot of these games, and even good ones, Pokemon games, Zelda, Elder Scrolls, their cities are always super underpopulated and small, and they'll make up for it by putting in like a big tower or palace or something in there. Like, oh, look at this huge tower, ignore the fact that there are like 200 people living in the biggest city in the universe. Red Dead actually has a real city in it, which is nice. Saint-Denis really does a good job encapsulating what a city was like back during these times. Theaters, crawlies, shit in the streets, the whole 9 yards. I know other games do this well too, I just like to praise it whenever I can because honestly this bothers me more than it probably should. I know that Red Dead is technically taking place in a fictional region, and Lemoyne is supposed to be like Louisiana, and I imagine Saint-Denis is supposed to be like New Orleans. And yes, I know that raises a few quintillion questions, but it's a cool parallel all the same. The soundtrack is pretty great as well. It's super periodic, like you have a band from that time period right behind you at all times, blasting action music during your gunfights. The music is super energetic and exciting when it needs to be, and during the slower moments there are a lot of super memorable tracks. Obviously, Rockstar and technically impressive are practically synonyms at this point, so we can just check that one off the list. The game's good, and at the very least I wasn't losing my mind like it was a fucking roguelike. So Dead Cells is a roguelike that was fully released out of beta in August of 2018. As a general rule, I very personally and subjectively fucking despise roguelikes. There is always so much wasted time, and I die on the final level and I have to play through 40 minutes of game again that I've already mastered for the 1700th time and put that into my fucking tally mark that I've been keeping on my arm, and I'm starting to lose my fucking mind! A big issue I've had with roguelikes is that they always feel so padded to me, and I think that I could probably replace an airbag in my car with one of them. Oh, you've created a 45-minute game? Just make it a roguelike, and now it's longer than the time I take to make a video. Dead Cells actually fills up its space with good shit and not copy and paste RNG rooms the whole time, which I know that's technically what it is, but each run in Dead Cells can come out much different from one another because of the absurd weapon quantity and the amount of mutations you can get from run to run. I'm not doing a great job of explaining it. For example, a weapon that does extra damage to monsters on fire will be much more useful if you have a fire grenade. There's a lot of time figuring out your playstyle and what combinations of weapons to go with in the next area. Yes, I know it can be annoying to get into an area and not have a weapon you like because of the RNG, but there is an abundance of shops, chests, and time doors that make this unlikely, and more likely it's the player's fault for not looking hard enough. I think the decision to make getting your items a random drop was to encourage experimenting and discovering new playstyles organically, so I don't really think it matters all that much. But to be honest, I hardly think we're longer than a minute and 30 seconds in one sitting to begin with, so maybe I'm just not the person to ask. Speaking of short durations of time, time doors are another part of Dead Cells that I think that makes the game easy to sit through in long stretches. Speedrunning through each area is actively encouraged, and it kills so much time when you're actively trying to get to a door you don't know the location of, or how much time is left to open it. It makes the game much more frantic and exciting during each run, and it doesn't waste nearly as much time due to how fast-paced it is. Oh, fuck, Timekeeper was a boss this year. Okay, sorry Gaston, that's my bad, but most of the bosses were pretty great in Dead Cells. I thought Hand of the King was total asinine dog shit when I first played through it. But upon a few runs, his moves are perfectly manageable. I mean, people can beat him without taking damage, which is pretty funny, kind of like the game. Meaning it has a good sense of humor. I mean, the fact that there's an option to turn off all meat in the game to vegetarian food is honestly funnier than anything I could say about it. Or that after you start dying a lot, all of your past corpses start funneling down a sewage pipeline. Definitely a problem I can relate to. The only real issue I have is the soundtrack can get a little samey after 10 to 20 hours. And don't get me wrong, the soundtrack is really good. Like, on a scale from Friday to my outro music, it's like a solid 4 out of 5. There's some cool stuff. Like, the clock tower ticking into the sound of the music is really cool. Other than that, there were lore tidbits added in that kind of flesh out the world a little bit more, make the game a little bit more interesting. They were added with the full release. So yes, Dead Cells was a very consistently fun experience, and I very much recommend it. Hopefully this isn't getting overly dry, but sometimes I need to just shoot out my thoughts into an all-out broadside and just deal with the consequences of going into the breach. What? The queue? When did I miss the queue? So this seems familiar. You're making the top 3 indies again. Who could have seen that coming? I haven't played God of War, if that makes you feel better. That could have been good. I'm probably going to play it after I'm done with this video. Breath of the Wild probably would have been my number 2 last year if I had actually finished playing it before the video came out. So who knows what'll happen by next year. Maybe they'll completely fix Fallout 76 and make it to the best game since Hitman 2. Anyway, Into the Breach is really fun. For what is kind of a limited amount of content on paper here, there's a crazy amount of shit the game does. There are so many different playstyles thanks to how many squads there are. There are 8. There are 8. I didn't have to tell you that. I'm just such a good guy. I guess there's a secret squad technically when you play as the bug people, which is pretty cool. Everyone in their battle mechs has already talked about how the game stands out by itself by quite literally spelling out what your enemy is going to do next. But what makes it great is that it means that there are things that are rarely BS, as you see that everything the AI is going to do. You see their movement, range, where their attacks are pointed, and straight up what the enemy is going to do every single turn. When I screw up in this game, I always say, wow, I'm fucking retarded. Not, wow, my guy missed a headshot that he had a 95% chance of hitting with the barrel of his gun pressed 6 inches deep into the other guy's fucking larynx, but whatever, I'm cool. Into the Breach actually kind of makes itself immune to bullshit excuses the player can tell themselves at times. If you know what's gonna happen every single time and you're still consistently getting fucked, it's because you're not taking all the possibilities into consideration. And even in those rare cases where there's nothing you can do, the reward for thinking and focusing is still there. It just switches to minimizing the damages. And these situations are generally brought upon by an error in thinking ahead to the next turn anyway, so the point still stands. The difficulty is very fair, which I think enhances it as a great form of escapism, when in comparison to real life, that is honestly very similar to missing a 95% chance to hit shot. Well, either way, the environmentally gimmicky things are very cool in every single area that they're in. Admittedly, the starting island or the Green Mountain Island, depending on where you are in the game, doesn't really have one other than the occasional dam level, but that's the exception, not the rule. There's so much variety in all the other levels anyway, so even plainness can kind of feel unique in a way, because I guess it is. The squads are very well put together too. I haven't fucked too heavily with custom squads, although I probably will at some point. It's a nice quality of life edition that gives you more options to play around with. My go-to squad is the Zenith Guard, and it's entirely possible that I just haven't played long enough to realize they suck yet, as is tradition with a lot of first playthroughs of strategy games, or maybe just games in general, come to think of it. But all the squads have a different strategy you go with them, but they're pretty substantial in how much the game's squads change how you play. With the Zenith Guard, you have to try and support your drone to either manage enemies to keep them in from getting damage, or moving enemies into private locations for your thick laser fuckboy to kill them. All the while, your retarded suicide mech does a little bit of both, what with the moving the enemy and the damaging them, all with the distinct flair of self-harm and masochism. Figuring out all these playstyles is very satisfying, and... Okay, what the fuck is this? Okay, you guys need to tell me when you're gonna transition, or else it's just gonna... So how exactly do you tackle a game that's biggest problem is that I just want to fucking forget about it so I can play the thing again? Big shit, hindsight, that might not make sense if you've never played the game, so brief intermission. But Obra Dinn is a detective game that is set in the late Cretaceous period, more specifically 1807, where you're using a pocket watch that allows you to relive the last few seconds of someone's life before they died. And using said watch, you must decipher what happened to all the crew members on the Obra Dinn. So basically, it's nothing short of solving a real murder case if you were given the biggest handicap ever possibly conceived. I should also add that if this sounds at all cool to you, I would especially avoid this section if you haven't played it for yourself. I don't think I've been too spoiler heavy thus far, but I know that people can be kind of anal about this kind of thing, so I thought I'd mention it regardless. But now that that's out of the way, I can talk about how I've been following Obra Dinn back to its house at night just to beg it for one more, only to promptly have the door slammed in my face. I guess this just goes back to my core problem that I just want to play the game again, but I really can't. I already figured everything out, and I've already gotten the best experience I'll ever get out of it. Heroin joke, heroin joke. So needless to say, the first run of this game is really fun, and I don't think it would be an understatement to say that it's really probably the most interesting thing that came out of this year. Last 2 years, whatever. And I know that being an insurance investigator sounds about as exciting as being an insurance investigator, but apart from being that original, there's actually some pretty great stuff in here too. The sound design and voice acting is great. It is uncomfortable how realistic the boat seems, even though there's no animation in the game to speak of. You hear the boat creaking and the waves pushing against the boat. There's storms that sound like you can hear the water pounding against the wood on the deck, but you can also hear it in the background hitting the water. I can't say I personally heard someone's throat getting slit in real life, but if I did know, which I obviously don't, I would say that they are very faithful to the act of throat slittery. The voice acting is great, and that's specifically merciful, because if I had to go through this game with bad voice acting, it probably would have lit fucking fireworks in my ears somewhere around the first hour mark. And that's about how long it took me to realize that this game actually respects my intelligence enough to let me just figure shit out. The story doesn't have to bend over backwards to help you figure out shit, because it actually just lets you do it. No one as they're dying just shouts out their name, rank, profession, family history, cast code to the family safe, and a hand job. You have to actually resort to things like dress, where they bull around the ship, ethnicity. It just makes for a very satisfying challenge because it rewards your ability to make good observations and remember important information. Going back to the story, it's pretty cool. It's a little basic once you've actually figured the whole thing out, but the structure is what's impressive about it. I've heard of non-linear storytelling before, but this is a non-sequential one, which I have to say is kind of new to me. Because you can find bodies and go back and watch victims' death, there are some cases where the body isn't on your ship at your time anymore, but their body is still there inside someone else's time that you have now gone back to and accessed their memory through. This means that the story points can literally be told in reverse. And it's cool. It fits in as another figure it out challenge, overhanging each individual mini challenge you go through from person to person. I think it has a very powerful creative vision, which is something that I could say about all my favorites this year, but I think it might be the most true with Celeste. Now let me be clear, when I first started playing Celeste, I was not expecting to love it nearly as much as I ended up loving it. If I'm being totally honest with you guys, I thought this whole year was pretty middling. I feel like most of everything that came out had issues to an extent. Even though I like games like Gris, Unworthy, and Red Dead 2 a lot, I don't think I can confidently say that they're fucking phenomenal. But let's think of this as if it's an outlier situation, okay? If I thought Rust was the only noticeably bad game this year, then Celeste is the only game from this year that I think is close to flawless. I honestly don't even know how to make commentary or funny jokes in this section.
Like you were making them before.
You know what, Gary? I don't need you anymore.
You're so mentally obese, it's gonna start to hurt, my boy.
Holy fuck. Holy fuck, stop. Assassin's Creed Feather.
A feather? You are so immensely brain dead that humanity as a species has gone down on the hypothetical mammal-based tier list. Or at least it would have if you had enough fucking gray matter to call yourself a mammal in the first place, you gangly-on piece of
How the fuck? I used the disintegrate feather.
Now plummet to the abyss where your channel belongs, you worthless let's player.
Asshole. What's this? Alright, I guess I could kill some time. I'm ready.
Looking for me? I thought you were done with me.
I'm sorry, Gary. That was a mistake.
You think you had me all figured out? That you don't need me?
We need to move past this, Gary.
Why would I trust you after all you did to me? You pulled the feather out, bro. That shit's dangerous. And even regardless of that, you honestly think you have what it takes to defeat me?
No, but I have what it takes to defeat the you that wants to defeat me.
Not if my holy blades of wrath have anything to say about it.
Suck my dick, I have 2 feathers this time.
Oh, fuck. Shit. But I hope you haven't mastered the double jump yet.
But that's where you're woefully mistaken.
Okay, I guess you win, Marco. I'll try to just leave you and your massive penis alone.
I don't want that, Gary. I want you to grow and become a real part of me.
You're joking, right?
It's okay to be afraid. So, Gary is gonna be doing the rest of the Celeste review with me. Any input?
You're shit.
Fantastic. So everyone keeps describing the controls in this game as very precise, and I mean that's half true. Like, the dash has a set distance and is responsive, but so does every game with a dash. It's more like the level design necessitates that you have a very precise timing and understanding of what you're going to be doing, or else you'll eat shit a lot. Generally, how the levels progress will be that you'll start off with a very interesting gimmick or ability that you have to learn or master throughout the course of the level. Take the meaty planetary chunk void things at the old site. The gimmick isn't just that this level has meat chunks, even though that would have probably already been reasonably interesting enough on its own, but there are quirks to this scenario that are exciting and dramatically raise the skill ceiling in regards to how effectively you can use these things. If you could time it right on one of the exit thingies, you get much more air with your jump. It's the kind of thing that adds a lot to a game's replay value. Gamers are great, and they can keep a game varied and interesting as long as they're well incorporated into the game's sandbox, but Celeste has depth to them beyond just having a different challenge for every level, and it evokes more of a feeling of mastery and not just completion. That was such a basic thing I just described, and I already went on about it longer than I fucking talked about Paladins for, so I'll try and get through the rest of my gushing without pulling out an almanac of reasons why the game is awesome. The music is perfect. I don't listen to music in my free time, ever, but the score for this game is just so fucking perfect it boggles my mind.
You're incredibly small mind.
Good one, Gary. You know what? Speaking of flawed characters,
Don't use me like that, you little worm.
all of the characters feel grounded in reality. I think this is mainly just because of how on display all the flaws of the characters are. Madeline is very clearly depressed and anxious at points. Theo is way over-concerned with how perfect he looks online. The old lady is kind of a nutcase. Mr. Oshiro doesn't seem like he can really mentally deal with stress. And Madeline's bad sign is literally just a walking flaw for a majority of the game. Having all of your negative thoughts and emotions put out in front of you as a physical dark reflection of yourself is a pretty cool concept for an antagonist, if you ask me. And the fact that she isn't even one-dimensional should show how much these people cared about making these characters work. Anyway, I don't want to keep chugging this out because holy shit, this is getting long, erection joke, so I want to end the video off with this. I really hope this video was entertaining to someone and that it wasn't that much of a chore to sit through. I'd like to make these videos get to a point where they can just hopefully make your day a little bit better and not be an active chore to sit through. I think that the reason today that I think the 2017 video was so unbearable is that I forewent actual criticism in favor of jokes, which in hindsight I think was a pretty shit way of doing it, but I hope I didn't make this one too dry. Regardless, I'd like to cap this one off with a strong recommendation to check out the top 3 games on my list this year. I think that people that don't even play video games that regularly should get something out of these. Anyway, hopefully this was insightful and entertaining. Have a great day, lads. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe.